Hi and welcome everyone to another webinar in the Rig Run Recovery Zone series. So just a wee reminder, if you are joining us live today, if you wouldn't mind turning off your camera and your mic, but if you've got any questions, feel free to pop those in the chat and we'll get to those at the end. The session's being recorded. It will be available on the Rig Run Recovery Zone website for you to view later. And today we're joined by Tom Gurney. So Tom is a lecturer in exercise physiology at University College London, and he's here today to talk to us about supplements, which I think can be a very confusing and complex area for a lot of us. So Tom's here today. He's going to share the latest science about how certain supplements can help with sporting performance and how they can help with leading a healthier lifestyle. So thank you, Tom. I'll pass over to you this now.
Thank you very much. Okay, just double checking you can see my screen all okay?
Yes, you can see that fine. Thanks, Tom.
Great, thank you. Okay. Great, thank you very much for the introduction. So, yeah, my name is Tom Gurney, lecturer at University College London, and a lot of my research predominantly focuses on supplementation for health and exercise performance. And over the last sort of few years, I've been looking particularly at algae, so microalgae. But today I'm going to be talking to you all about some quite strong, supplements that may be beneficial for during your rig run events. I think we've already sort of alluded to the amount of supplements that there are currently on the market, and it is an absolute minefield. So I'm going to try and break up this session into a little bit of helping you maybe to make some informed decisions with regards to supplementation. So thinking critically about maybe some supplements that may be beneficial for you, whether that's performance or health reasons. And then I'm going to break down into three particular supplements. One is going to look at strength and power parameters, and then the other one's going to be looking at cardio. And then the third supplement is going to be looking about how we can maybe use a supplement to optimize your recovery in between maybe your sessions, particularly during your rig run events. So before we get started, I think it's really important to try and define what we really mean by a dietary supplement. And it can be quite a broad classification, as I'm sure many of you may be aware that lots of different types of supplements that might be available on the market. But the International Olympic Committee defined it as normally as a nutrient or a food component that is purposely ingested in addition to your normal diet, and then with the aim of achieving a specific performance or health outcome. So it's important to consider here it's something that you do take in addition to what you may have along with your normal diet. And as I've briefly spoken about, it does come in many forms. You can see this photo on the left-hand side here. We've got sport drinks. These are typically composed of carbohydrates and caffeine, and sometimes you might get some protein shakes in there as well. It also comes in powdered form, and these powdered forms can be quite good if you want to make your own smoothies or take it in the purest raw organic form that you might be able to find it in. And then also these powders can often sometimes be put into capsules, or you can get it compressed into pills as well. So from a consumer perspective, from your perspective, it's actually really good because you get a vast range of supplements in which ways you may be preferring to ingest. But as I said, it is a bit of a minefield. I'm going to be talking in the next slide about how you can think critically about why it may be best to be careful about what you might want to consider supplementing. But the market is continuously increasing. And the main reason behind this is that as human beings, we're generally learning more as we develop as a species. But there's also this massive rise in, of course, social media trends as well now over the last sort of 10 to 20 years. And so this is really stemming this massive upsurge in interest in how we can maybe start taking some form of supplement. It's also important to note that our lives are unfortunately ever getting busier and busier, and therefore some people will naturally try and turn to supplements to help them with a balanced diet. You can see here some of the main supplements on your left-hand side are vitamins, which is one of the most common supplements you can take. Normally, most people have some sort of vitamin stored up in their cupboards at home, and also some other various other factors and supplements as well. So some of the common reasons given by athletes for supplements are mainly always stemming from the performance area, but also for health as well. And then this study in 2007 and then supported in 2018 looked at some of these reasons, and athletes mainly said that it was to optimize recovery or maybe to gain a competitive edge, ability to maybe train harder as well. So for those of you that are working towards your rig run events, and certainly when you the amount of training sessions you complete, if you can complete more of them, then we know that's going to be more beneficial for your team. Um, but also for direct health benefits as well. So reducing the sick days can be quite an important factor. So obviously, if you're off sick during those run events, then this can have a significant impact on your team, and therefore also for performance parameters as well. And so some athletes say that it can help correct nutrient deficiencies and optimize nutrition as well. Some other areas in which is explored in this study was advice from others. So you might find that there's some fellow colleagues that are also saying that there's some supplements work. You might also see some significant others, so coaches or well-known athletes taking supplements, and therefore you may feel like it's necessary for yourself to also maybe start consuming a supplement as well. These other reasons are more for sort of the elite athletes. You can see here there's some possible financial gain and sponsorship for athletes, but what's important here is convenience as well. And I spoke about that in the slide just beforehand about talking about how popular supplements are becoming, and it can be really convenient for certain individuals who might work really tough long shifts, but also maybe for athletes that are training 7-8 hours a day, so those elite athletes, and they may need to take some sort of supplement to make sure they get the appropriate nutrition into their bodies as well. But making informed decisions is really, really important, and the market is an absolute minefield. There's so many companies that are making these big claims about whether or not their supplement may or may not work, depending on whether that's health or performance parameters as well. And this rise of social media is making really difficult to be able to distinguish between genuine information and misinformation, so false and accurate claims as well. And one prominent figure within the academic community right now is trying to work on some of this is Dr. Nick Tiller. You can follow him on Twitter, and he's a really good academic, which is trying to work really hard in underpinning and understanding some of the pseudoscience which is happening in and around nutrition, and trying to help the general population understand maybe what some fake claims may be happening. So just a little top tip from me: if you're thinking about some form of supplements, do your own reading where possible. Think about whether it's a reputable company. Is the supplement well known? What does the research say? Don't be afraid to reach out to researchers or doctors or clinicians, because they're always more than happy to be able to help you. And think critically: does it sound too good to be true? Okay. So over the next couple of slides, I'm going to be talking about 3 popular supplements that seem to have some quite strong evidence for improving various markers within exercise performance. The first one is creatine. I'm sure some of you may have heard of creatine before, but this normally comes in powdered form, as you can see here in this figure on the right hand side here, and is usually taken alongside a protein shake, and it is particularly important for high intensity training or for those individuals who like to weight lift. So if you typically have a preference for lifting weights as your workout, this supplement can be really beneficial for you in possibly improving your isometric strength, power, your lean mass as well, and also some muscular strength, including sprinting as well. So it's not necessarily just for those individuals that decide to lift weights. So if you have maybe some high intensity training within your endurance size program, then this can also be quite a beneficial supplement for you. And I'm going to be talking about a couple of the studies in which we know how effective this supplement is. But how does it work? Well, I'm going to briefly speak about this now. And when we think about why and how we need energy for exercise, we know that we have our ATP. And when we are exercising, we are burning our ATP. Therefore, the more we exercise, the less ATP is circulating within the blood, and then we have this reduction into ADP. Now, to supplement with creatine, we increase our creatine stores and our phosphocreatine, which then allows us to start generating more ATP and therefore more energy. So just to break that down a little bit further, you can see here in the resting muscle, we then have this increase in creatine and phosphocreatine occurring, which can combine to ADP, and therefore we start having some ATP generated within the active muscle. So supplementing with creatine can help us, particularly for those events in strength and power, and also the short, higher intensity. There's also been some really interesting research to suggest that supplementing creatine alongside protein and carbohydrate can actually give us more of a benefit than just taking creatine by itself. You can see here in this study, they looked at individuals who are just taking a protein shake with carbohydrate, and then a drink with creatine, protein, and carbohydrate in. And along the x-axis here, you've got your different types of muscle fibers. So you've got your type 1s, which are typically aerobic, and your type 2 muscle fibers, which are typically anaerobic. You can see here that in the white boxes, by supplementing creatine alongside some protein and some carbohydrate, we see a much more significant benefit and increase in our muscle fiber types here. And this was the same for when they looked at some of the parameters within the gym. So bench press, pull down, and squat. For those of you who may be aware of some of these, and you can see here in the creatine, protein, and carbohydrate drink group, there was a much larger increase in the 1 rep max, so how much they could do just in 1 repetition. So when supplementing creatine, think about trying to ingest it alongside some protein and carbohydrates, as it will help with the bioavailability and allow you to then hopefully produce some more ATP for the same amount of exercise. So some of the protocols of use, this can be important to consider, particularly maybe the week leading up to you going offshore or onto the rig. And you can load up for around 7 days, 5 grams 4 times per day, so 20 grams in total. And then when you maybe get onto the rig, you can then start taking a smaller amount, because I know it's quite difficult for how much, and you're limited for how much you can take onto the rigs. You can start loading up with a smaller amount per day of around 3 to 5 grams. As I previously discussed, making sure you try and mix it with some sort of protein or carbohydrate. If you don't have access to that, then maybe just take it with some food, and this can hopefully increase the uptake of creatine into the muscles, and therefore increase your ATP production. There is a potential for you to increase your body mass when you are taking creatine, and this is because creatine likes to bind and retain some of the water within the muscle and within the body. So don't be too concerned if you seem to be putting on a bit of weight when you start taking creatine. This is quite a normal thing to happen. And when you stop taking it, the weight will drop off. So just a quick overview on creatine. Creatine is really good for enhancing maximal isostatic strength, could help you increase your lean body mass, and also your power parameters as well. There is some research to suggest that it can improve sprinting, some possible middle distance events that might have a sprint finish, for example, and also some team sports. The main mechanism is that it increases our phosphocreatine stores, which allow us to create more ATP and therefore energy. The next supplement I wanted to talk about is mainly focused on endurance and aerobic exercise. And some of you may have heard about nitrate supplementation before, but for those of you who haven't, nitrates are typically found within leafy green vegetables. So as a whole food source, you can find them in spinach, kale, leafy greens such as beetroot juice as well, or beetroots. But more commonly now, you'll find that this beetroot or nitrate shots are normally put into these very small packets here, in which there's a high amount of nitrate inserted into these shots. Because unfortunately, some of the earlier studies, certainly in the 2006, 2007, individuals were having to consume liters and liters of beetroot juice in order to get some beneficial performance benefits. So some research have now created a shot which has a lot of high nitrate concentration within just one shot, to save you drinking quite so many beetroot. So how does nitrate supplementation work? Well, it's predominantly due to the nitric oxide pathway, whereby ingesting nitrate is reduced to nitrite, and then we have nitric oxide being circulated within the body. And we know nitric oxide is really important for vasodilation, and this vasodilation will improve the blood flow to our muscles, to our heart, and therefore allow us to improve maybe some of our exercise efficiency, and also how we deal with some glucose and muscular fatigue as well. So when we ingest beetroot juice supplementation, we actually reduce it first within the mouth bacteria. So within our anaerobic bacteria within our mouth into nitrite, it then gets reduced further into our stomach into nitric oxide. Now, because we ingest it into our mouth, and one of the reducing stages is within our mouth bacteria, it's really important that if you're very serious about ingesting nitrate for your performance, you need to avoid mouthwash, because this antibacterial mouthwash will destroy the natural bacteria that's happening within your oral cavity. But if we take a look in this box into a little bit more detail, you can see here that this vasodilation can improve our mitochondria biogenesis. So the size of our mitochondria are really important for the powerhouse of our muscles, respiration, our glucose as well. And then we start to see these beneficial effects happening within our cardiorespiratory performance and improve economy and efficiency. I'm going to speak about one of the earlier studies here, and this is looking at how efficient our muscles were after supplementing with nitrate. You can see here the group within the white boxes here. If you look at that ATP total, they were asked to perform 6 exercise bouts, knee extensive exercise bouts at the same intensity as compared to placebo. But when they looked at the ATP turnover, there was significantly less ATP being generated for the same amount of force being used as well. So this nitrate supplementation was suggesting that actually not only can it improve our exercise performance, but it can also allow us to use less energy for the same amount of force. So it's making us much more efficient in doing so. And this is potentially due to the increase in blood flow to the muscle sites as well. So just to summarize some of the protocol as use, it takes around 2 to 3 hours for that digestion to occur. So if you're wanting to take an acute dose, 2 to 3 hours before your event would be really good. And you can load up around 6 to 8 millimoles. And this can normally be beneficial for events less than 40 minutes. You can also load up as well. So you can load up for 5 to 8 days. For those of you that might be highly trained athletes, normally we ask athletes to consume a lot more because performance gains are normally quite harder to achieve. There are some minor side effects associated with beetroot juice supplementation. Bacteria is predominantly talking about the change in color in your stools and your urine. So the red pigment will go into that. Some athletes report some minor discomfort, but they are quite rare. Some headaches as well associated with supplementation. But on the whole, this is a reported supplement that has been really popular over the last 5 to 10 years within the research community. So just a brief overview then, it can reduce our oxygen costs, so the amount of ATP that we're using for the same amount of force. It can improve our time trials, so time to exhaustion, our power output. Cycling, rowing, running has also been shown to be beneficial for it. And these hypothesized mechanisms are allowing us to use less ATP for the same amount of force, and therefore not needing to use anywhere near as much oxygen to get our ATP resynthesis to occur. The last supplement I wanted to talk about was turmeric or curcumin, and this one is really beneficial for post exercise, or if you're in between quite a high intensity load. And this natural spice is native to China, and back many years it was typically used to treat sickness and disease, and this is mainly due to its anti-inflammatory properties that it has. It is a polyphenol, so this is what gives its distinct yellow color. And there is a lot of new research ongoing at the moment talking about and thinking about how turmeric can be beneficial for not only performance, but also for some health conditions as well. So for any inflammatory health conditions. This slide is a little bit busy, but I don't want you to think about too much other than what I've just circulated here. So some of the purported benefits are, as I've already discussed, some anti-inflammatory activity. It's a good antioxidant as well. Importantly, it can reduce your muscle damage and muscle soreness in between exercise bouts or training days. So if you've got a really high intense period, particularly if you've got your rig run event going on and you've only got a few more days left, then this might be a good supplement to consider in between your resting sessions if you don't have much time. Importantly, it also has quite a good psychological benefit to exercise as well. So knowing full well that if you don't have quite so much muscle damage or muscle soreness, psychologically, you're probably going to be feeling a lot better about maybe doing some more exercise for your events. Looking at some of the research, then we can see here that in the curcumin group, whereby they measured the muscle soreness scores 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, and 4 day, you can see here that in the black triangles is where the individuals were consuming curcumin or turmeric here. And you can see there was significantly less muscle soreness post exercise 1, 2, and 3 days afterwards. And that's the same for palpating the muscles, some individual pushing on the muscle themselves, or extending the muscle as well. So for those of you that have experienced some muscle soreness before from exercise, you know that it can actually be quite difficult to deal with, particularly if you've done a new exercise regime. There's also been some research to suggest that it can reduce our creatine kinase. Now, creatine kinase is a marker for muscle damage. So you can see here that in the placebo group, the creatine kinase markers was a lot higher in comparison to the curcumin group. So by supplementing with curcumin, doing 1 rep max eccentric muscle contractions, there was significantly less creatine kinase, i.e. less muscle damage occurring after supplementing with curcumin. So some of the suggested protocols of use for this supplement is typically around 5 grams per day. The good thing about this is, as it can come in powder form, you can put it in shots yourself or into any sort of form of liquid if you wanted to, if you didn't get on particularly well with capsules, but roughly around 5 grams per day. And as I've been talking about, it's best taken when you've got minimal rest days. Now, there is one really important thing to consider with this supplement, is that you need to consider whether or not it's appropriate for you at the given time. Now, what I mean by that is actually inflammation is a very, very natural and normal response from exercise. And it's something that we want to encourage some physiological adaptations to occur within the muscle and allow us to regenerate our muscles from exercise. And so if you're just taking curcumin for training, it's probably not the best thing to do, because you want this inflammation, you want this stress to occur within your muscles to allow you to adapt. But if you're in the heart of competition and you need to recover quickly for the next day, then this is definitely the type of supplement you might want to consider to help you get back out there and exercising for your team for the rig run event. There doesn't seem to be much in the literature to suggest that there's many reported side effects, so it seems to be quite a promising supplement to be taking so far. So just this brief summary then on turmeric. There is good evidence and promising evidence coming out that it can reduce inflammation and oxidative stress, and importantly can decrease pain and muscle damage as well. So this can be really good for those of you that might be doing some high intensity workouts as well. And it has this psychological effect that can be beneficial. The main mechanisms are that it can modulate and regulate inflammatory markers and therefore encourage some pro-inflammation cytokines to occur within the muscles as well. So just a brief summary then, thinking about what I was speaking to. For those of you that have watched my first lecture review about nutrition and night shift, always try and do your food first approach first. So thinking about having appropriate sport nutrition, so enough carbohydrate, fats and protein, and then start thinking about whether or not you need to start taking a supplement to be beneficial for your training and performance events. Creatine is really good for those of you that are really trying to build some lean muscle mass for strength and power athletes. Nitrates seem to be pretty good for endurance athletes. So for those of you who prefer to do aerobic exercise, or for those that are doing some time trials or time to exhaustion events, so working as hard as you can for as long as you can. And importantly, I think this would be really beneficial for you working up into your rig run events, is thinking about turmeric for your post-exercise recovery as well. Unfortunately, though, a lot of people start their pyramid, building their pyramid the wrong way around. They immediately turn to supplements, thinking that will be the best thing for them, when in fact a balanced diet is definitely the thing you need to be working on first. So making sure you've got that food first approach. You can then start tailoring your nutrition depending on what type of exercise you're doing. So increasing your protein, increasing your carbohydrates, and then start thinking about taking a supplement to benefit your training and performance parameters. So just to summarize then, should you be taking some sports supplements? Well, context is really key. Think about what type of supplement it is and whether or not it's beneficial for the type of exercise you do. Do you really need it? Is there a way in which you can ingest it without necessarily having to pay for some food, pay for some supplements? And think about whether or not it's for training or competition. I've spoken about over the last slides what supplements you might want to consider for training and competition. It's also highly individualized as well. So some individuals may benefit more than others, and there's always this sort of placebo effect from happening. So individuals thinking that because they're taking a supplement, there may be some benefit to them. And unfortunately, because the supplementation market is such a minefield, there is a lot of outweighing sort of the cost and benefit factors, and also risk as well. So start thinking about how expensive maybe a supplement is, and thinking about whether or not it's really beneficial for you and whether or not you need it. Just for some further reading, I've hopefully this will be uploaded onto the Recovery Zone area for you all. This paper was published by the International Olympic Committee, and they have summarized some other supplements which I haven't spoken about today, which you can go away and have a look at to see where some of the research is going with some of those supplements. And this can be quite a nice little read if you're after or wanting to look at some supplements that I haven't considered or spoken about today. Thank you very much for listening. Just a last point, if there is any supplements that you're considering or already are taking, but would like some advice or would like to understand a little bit more about it, please do feel free to contact me. I'd be more than happy to point you into directions to some good literature or some good resources which will help you understand whether or not supplementation might be appropriate for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Super interesting, and thanks, for providing your contact details as well. I think that's, like you said, it is a minefield, and people don't often know what the right options are and what the right choices are for them. So it can really be complex and confusing, can't it? This whole area of supplementation. But I think it was really useful to hear about those three: the creatine, the nitrates, the turmeric, that have all sort of been very well researched. They've all been kind of shown to improve your sporting performance in different ways. So very useful to hear that.
Yeah, I wanted to focus on them rather than novel supplements, because a lot of my research is in novel supplements, but I think it's really important to give you all a good understanding of maybe some of the best well-researched supplements so far. Turmeric is up and coming. It's not quite as well researched as nitrate and creatine, but there is some supplements out there that are certainly very novel, and there's not enough literature out there at the moment to recommend its use. And so those are the things that just need to be careful about if you're starting to think about a supplement. And that's what I tried to allude to on the first couple of slides, is really trying to think critically. Is there a lot of research on this? Do other people use it? And whether or not you can reach out to maybe someone appropriately to see whether or not it might be best for you.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good that you mentioned creatine as well. Last week I did a webinar on kind of protein intake and maximizing muscle protein synthesis. So we talked a lot about protein and amino acids, and alluded to the fact that there were kind of other foods or supplements that people could take to try and help with their strength training. So that ties in really nicely. That's really good. I had just one quick question for you.
Yep.
And it's about so you're talking about beetroot juice and how they contain high amounts of nitrates.
Yeah.
And nitrates can help with vasodilation. So that's expanding the blood vessels, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, you can see why that could help with sporting performance, but do you think that's something that might be able to help with people who say have high blood pressure?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of research that is being conducted in the clinical area as well because of the vasodilation properties of nitrate supplementation or beetroot juice, and so it's a good way to maybe consider taking some sort of natural supplement to reduce maybe your blood pressure. Definitely have a look into that, and have a look at maybe what some of the research does. But I know from the research that I've read that there's two areas within the nitrate literature, and that's a clinical aspect, and also from the performance aspect as well. And the clinical aspect, it can be really impactful for individuals that might have some comorbidities that might need some natural supplements to really help them.
Yeah, I think that's an area that a lot of people might be interested in as well, isn't it, in terms of kind of um, population health and kind of thinking
Yeah.
about sort of overall well-being as well as their sporting performance. Would you
Yeah.
say there's any one supplement that you think everybody should take no matter what?
That's a great question.
Or is it
It's a,
very individualized and
it,
depending
it,
on the
it,
person?
it is really individualized. I think from the efficacy perspective, so how much the research is suggesting how promising it is, creatine is certainly something that's really and that, as I said to, can be something that can be beneficial for not only strength and power athletes, but also from an endurance perspective. If you're doing some higher intensity training sessions, can be beneficial. So that one's been really well and widely researched. So that one would probably be like the go-to.
Mhm.
But there's some really interesting supplements that are coming out. So I spoke about some of the algae side of things that I've been looking at. Again, the literature isn't strong enough yet to suggest or to really promise its use, but I think overall creatine, caffeine is a really good one as well. I haven't spoken about
Mhm.
that one today, but caffeine is also a very well researched supplement that can be beneficial for all types of areas in life, as I'm sure we've spoken about with the cognition side of things, as well as performance as well. So caffeine and creatine, probably your go-tos. Caffeine can be beneficial on the spot there and then. Obviously, roughly it takes about 30 minutes, but creatine will be a great one to take whilst you're training as well.
Yeah,
But we
perfect.
can always be playing and thinking about some of the novel supplements as well, and thinking about
Yeah.
some of that newer stuff out there. But yeah, creatine and caffeine are the most widely researched and seem to have some really good evidence of being impactful for exercise.
Okay, super. And some of the others is a case of wait and see and find out what
Yeah.
the scientific evidence proves. But in the meantime, don't rely on some fitness guru on TikTok. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, please. Yeah, please do not. So the paper that I've sent you and hopefully will be uploaded has it touches on some other supplements which have got some quite good promising research as well, and they also touch on some novel ones as well. So, making sure that you're reading from reputable sources is really important. So, yeah, fitness gurus on TikTok or various fitness pages may not necessarily be your best source. So always try and find the research where possible. But it can be difficult, as I said. Naturally your go-to will be those web pages, but take it with a pinch of salt and always just think critically about it.
Yeah, great advice, Tom. Thank you very much for your time today. It was really interesting.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye now.